I'm Derrick Day, and he is.
I am Aaron Tomlinson. Good to be with you, Derek, and good to be with everybody watching.
Indeed. Good to see you, man, and always good to see you, and good to be with everybody tonight. It's a fine fucking Friday night. That's all I'll say about that. But anyway, Aaron, what is in the glass tonight?
Well, I've got a margarita tonight, so just simple margarita.
Yeah. How strong?
Um, Not too strong.
Yeah. Yeah, I can dig it. I made a mule with Reed's ginger beer, lime juice,
Mm,
and vodka. But the secret sauce is this, and I've shared this with everybody before, this hibiscus ginger beer. Now, one quick thing I want to share. One day I'm going to make a mule with lavender ginger beer. That's special.
yeah,
That is all kinds of special.
I like that lavender stuff for sure.
So yeah, man. So I saw you in the green room with your hat on, and I was like, I
Yeah,
said, shit, let me grab a hat real quick.
yeah, yeah. It's winter, bad hair day. You know how it goes.
You know,
Or you probably never have a bad hair day, but mine's pretty unruly.
yeah, well, like it's only a bad hair day if I don't pull it back. If I don't pull it back, it could be all over the place.
Yeah, I imagine.
But yeah. So anyway, man, I reached out to you about a subject. So
Mm,
this is actually my subject tonight,
yes.
and and let me just say this. I want to start with it from here that I believe that given a sufficiently long timeline, most things have an explanation.
Hmm.
You know that there is a mechanic behind things, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And one of the things I want to talk about this, just kind of a prelude to this. There is a concept, and I just learned about this concept this year, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And the concept is called virtual particles. Virtual particles, because and why virtual particles are special is that they appear whether there's a medium or not, right? So a virtual particle, they come in pairs, and one is created and another one comes and destroys it.
Hmm.
And it usually happens like in nanoseconds. It's like really, really, you know, amazingly tight timeline. And so what I learned from virtual particles is that you can create something out of nothing
Mm.
because these particles have no energy source that's traceable, but they appear and they're destroyed. So why is that? What is the lead into the topic? Is that when we talk to people from religious backgrounds and especially people that subscribe to what they call creationist theory, they will always say you can't create something from nothing.
Mhm.
That for anything that exists, for any creative thing, there has to be a creator. Now, the thing about virtual particles is, do they respect time the same way we do? In other words, is the existence of a virtual particle pair billions of years to it, or is it just nanoseconds that it appears to us?
Mhm. It's a
And
great
and
question.
so anyway, that's my prelude. So the introduction is this, that I really believe, and this was something that kind of helped me over the hump with spirituality, and it also helped me to understand your metaphysical view of
Mhm.
things, and that is that I think that quantum physics, given a sufficiently long timeline, is going to explain a lot of what we call spiritual,
Mhm.
metaphysical, mystical. Is that to say that the spiritual, the mystical, the metaphysical will be totally eliminated? I doubt it. Because there's always going to be that thing, that next thing that
Mhm.
we can't explain. And so the religious folks will come in and say, "See, I told you so. I told you science is never going to figure everything out." But that's the whole beauty of it, is that science doesn't figure doesn't figure out everything.
Mhm.
But but science does figure out a lot of things. And
For
when it
sure.
figures out something new, it displaces what was previously held to be true.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between religion, or let's say religious spirituality, right?
Right.
Religious spirituality and like metaphysical spirituality, like you teach, in that, like in your model, there's always the possibility of new information, better
Right.
data, better understanding.
Right.
But in a religious spirituality paradigm, that's not accommodated. In other words, this is hard and fast. This is what it is, and you can't change it. But I humbly submit in my opening salvo here
Hmm.
that quantum physics goes a long way toward explaining
Sure.
a lot of what we see in the metaphysical and the mystical. And as we go through the show, I'll share some things, but I want to kick it over to you and get your
Yeah.
thoughts on this.
Yeah. Thanks. So I would say that excuse me, not all systems of knowledge are created equal, right?
Yep.
So like when you're comparing religion, dogmatic religion specifically, to science, you got to stick as pure. I mean, when I was trying to find out the truth from Christianity, I thought the closer I could get to the source, which that makes sense, the closer you can get to the source, the actual beliefs and teachings and practices that Jesus taught his disciples, the more accurate it's going to be, right? Which leaves you completely beholden to the past. So, I mean, kind of the theory is this really super advanced being, however you view Jesus, right?
Hmm.
This super advanced God in the flesh person came and gave a revelation. And because that person is so far advanced where we are, then the way forward is to cling to the past.
Mm.
And the more we can accurately trace the past, the better chances we have of progressing.
Yeah.
And so you're always beholden to the past. Of course, nobody's able to do that. It's impossible to do that. You've brought out in your Facebook posts repeatedly, just the lack of tangible, hard evidence that Jesus ever even existed. So if we can't prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, let's say, that Jesus the man existed, then how in the hell are we supposed to know what he taught? So
Right.
that's the first problem. So what I'm saying is science and not all bodies of knowledge are created equal. Some have more advantages than others. So I would say science definitely has the advantage that you're pointing out over religion. But I would also offer that all systems of knowledge are limited.
Right.
And so one of the things that I've done, because I've admitted on this channel before, quantum physics isn't it's a lot of it's above my pay grade. Um, so I've made it a point in the last couple months to watch videos and try to get as much understanding out of it as I possibly can. And one of the things that I found interesting was that there were a number of quantum theorists
Hmm.
who I listen to, and I don't understand all the physics of it, but I can get the general idea of what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Um, but looking at black holes and how time and space virtually collapses in a black hole, and how a black hole can't really be peered into because just by introducing light into part of what creates the black hole, right, is energy and matter collapsing upon itself.
Right.
And so they're theorizing, right, from the models that they have. And some of these guys, worked at CERN. One person I listened to, I think, chairs the department at Stanford. And they're saying that it's very possible that there is another matrix of reality that gives birth to time and space.
Yep.
And that if we discover that matrix that gives birth to time and space, that it'll completely shatter our paradigms and it'll be revolutionary and we'll be starting over.
Yeah.
So while I totally agree that given a sufficient amount of time, there can be an explanation, I'm not sure that explanation will be at all compatible with how we understand physical reality right now. It may require a completely different paradigm of reality. And so, it's interesting to think, well, what else could be out there, Um, so I would say that, and then I would just say for people that haven't been privy to our conversations or some of this information is new, from my perspective, there are, and I'm going to make this really, really simple and not nuanced. But if you want to take two basic fundamental views of reality in philosophy, you have one called idealism and one called realism. Unfortunate terms, because the way they're using those terms are not the way we use them in common vernacular.
Yeah.
But it has to do with what is the fundamental how do I say this? What is the most basic component of reality of our universe? Idealism says the most basic component is essentially matter. And again, I'm not nuancing it, but I'm trying to make it simple. So atoms, things that are objectively real out there.
Yep.
And then everything else is a byproduct of matter and can be explained within that context. Idealism says that mind or consciousness is base reality.
Yep.
Now, I find the arguments for idealism to be more intellectually compelling, for sure.
Yeah.
But I have this caveat. I cannot explain my experiences, which we've talked about a lot, right? And yours as well. I cannot explain experiences that I've had in any way, shape, or form within the context of realism, but I can completely make sense of both the material universe and physics and quantum physics and the experiences I've had from the perspective of idealism. That being said, it's quite possible that for us to advance and really understand the nature of reality, that there's going to have to be a whole new paradigm that blows both out of the water. And I'm here for it. I'm open to that. So that's how I kick it back to you.
Yeah, and that's a really good one too, because idealism versus realism. And this is something you and we've talked about privately, and I think we actually touched on this a couple of weeks ago, that what we deem to be reality at the quantum level can't be quantified as reality, because again, just the mere fact that you observe a quantum phenomenon changes its behavior. So with that, I'm sort of the mindset. I kind of balance now between realism and idealism, because I do believe that matter, energy, vibration, that these things comprise the physical universe. However, I do believe that consciousness plays a role in that. And the reason why I say that is like, okay, if I look at this cup, this is a stainless steel cup, and it's made of, what is stainless steel? It's iron, it's nickel, it's chromium, right? And some atomic composition. But beneath that, it's atoms, or beneath that it's molecules, and then beneath that it's atoms, and then beneath that it's electrons, neutrons, protons. Then beneath that it's bosons, leptons, firmicons, right? And then beneath that we surmise that there may be strings, right? So all of these things, like when you look at things at the quantum level, quantum particles, just the mere fact that we're looking at it changes it. Okay, so that means, how do we get to reality? If I'm looking, the mere fact that I'm looking at this is changing the behavior of at a quantum level. This is where consciousness comes in, because I believe that there has to be a collective consciousness that sets forth some law of agreement that makes things, right? That there is a law of agreement that makes gold gold, that makes iron iron, that makes cobalt cobalt, and so on and so forth, right? There has to be something like that. So I'm on the precipice of idealism and realism, because the real we can't deny. we,
Right.
we we can perceive this, we can quantify this as tangible, measurable, repeatable, but I don't think that we can dismiss easily the idealistic part, because the reality is that we've talked about this before. How is a TV a TV? A TV is a TV beyond above the quantum layer, simply because the right number of people have agreed that it is. So there's power in the realism view, but there's also power in the idealism
Mm.
view. And I really believe that what quantum physics does, I think, actually merges these two things. Because I sent you an article, I think, earlier this week, about quantum physics and consciousness,
Hmm.
right? And I don't know if you had a chance to look at it or not, but I thought it was really fascinating because, like, for one thing, they said that quantum entanglement is a good candidate for understanding conscious thought.
Hmm.
That and so let me say this, right? Because we've both had these fantastic spiritual encounters
Hmm.
or experiences, right? We've seen things. I think that you and I both have seen everything up to, but not including, the raising of the dead,
I think that's
right?
correct. Yeah.
I mean, healing of cancer, broken bones, blind eyes, deaf ears,
Right.
inability to speak, all kinds of things. People coming out of comas, people that were, that have been in comas for years. I've seen all of that. So the metaphysician will say, okay, Derrick, you're so hard on science. Why does that happen? You know, and this is my theory, or I have to keep fixing
Hypothesis.
my
Yeah. Yeah.
hypothesis.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I, but words matter.
Yeah.
So
They do. They do.
my hypothesis is that when a collective consciousness occurs, or let's say a conscious phenomenon.
Hmm.
So what happens is that when enough consciousness is aggregated at a point, it manifests as either a particle or a wave.
Hmm.
And once it develops a physical presence, something happens. And so I think that part of the thing is that if we understand how to tie our consciousness to the quantum realm, and this is something we've talked about before, that let's say that we're able to peer into other dimensions, or let's say the other. I saw something else on a documentary this week that posits that these other dimensions exist in our space. And I think we talked about this too. But these other dimensions exist in our space, but we don't have the faculty to perceive them. But let's say that someone gets to the point where they unlock something in the spiritual realm, the metaphysical realm, but in such a way that they're able to do this repeatedly. And then let's say that so like I'll give an example. Catherine Kuhlman,
Hmm.
she was said, or Smith Wigglesworth. These are two people that were said to have this phenomenal success rate with healings, with words of knowledge, words of wisdom, with raising the dead. They had done it all.
Yeah.
So how does that? Why is it that they were successful, Aaron, but
Right.
we weren't?
Yeah.
Right? And so my hypothesis, I had to fix myself, like so used to saying theory, but
Yeah.
my hypothesis is that if if we're able to first of all, raise our energy. So, like raising vibration, right? To the point where we resonate with others and create a singularity. That singularity causes something to happen. Now, the point that I'm getting at is that people like Catherine Coleman and Smith Wigglesworth, maybe they were able to consistently produce these singularities that produce some result that was understood to be spiritual, is understood to be mystical or metaphysical, but it actually had a physical origin. Or it was just that they were able to tap into something. And here's the funny thing: sometimes people are able to tap into things that they don't exactly understand at the time that they did. It's like Robert Oppenheimer and the nuclear bomb. It was they knew the destructive power of the atom, and they hypothesized the constructive application of it. But at the time that the bomb was built, the only thing they knew is how to split an atom or fuse an atom and create an explosion. Well,
Yep.
then shortly after that, somebody creates the first nuclear chain reaction, a controlled nuclear chain reaction, and they have nuclear reactors that can produce power, can produce electricity.
Yep.
So it's how do we get to this, harnessing this to produce this singularity, to
Yeah.
produce this result? Because I
Yeah.
would love nothing more than to harness the power of energy, of vibration, and bring it to pass in such a way that, okay, you can say this is undeniable. This is something that actually can happen, and it can happen with repetition.
Yeah. Lots, lots to unpack there. One thing, the first thing you said, I find this fascinating. So we peer into the microscopic world, we discover molecules. We peer into molecules, we discover atoms. We peer into atoms, we discover neutrons, protons, electrons. We
Yep.
peer into those, we discover the boson particles, et cetera, and so on, right?
Yep.
So it almost seems infinite.
Yep.
Now, from what I understand, and again, people have to forgive me here because I'm acknowledging that I'm a kindergartner in this. But when I was watching these guys that aren't kindergartners, that have devoted their lives to study of this, some of them worked at CERN, and this is where black holes come in. They said that they've gotten to the point where the amount of energy that it would take to observe or measure mathematically, right? Mathematics ultimately is about measuring.
Mhm.
Anything smaller is what would create a black hole, because it would require so much mass and energy that to peer into anything deeper, reality would collapse on itself.
Oh, wow.
Time and space would collapse on itself. Like the amount of energy it would take to be able to measure something, or they don't actually measure it like we think of measuring, but
Yeah.
to be able to observe the effects, I guess that's the right way to say it,
Yeah.
something that small would require so much energy it would create a black hole. So that's why black holes now are being so studied and talked about within the realm of quantum physics, because they're recognizing we've reached a limitation. We
Yeah.
can't go any deeper. So you just wonder, is it infinite? Could you keep going smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, just like if you keep going out into space, right?
Yep.
Which I find incredibly fascinating. Incredibly fascinating.
Hey, have you ever looked at what they call Malbrecht sequences?
No, that's a
It's
new
like
term to me.
it's like a shape that no matter how much you drill into it, it's always the same shape over and over again.
Okay.
And it's sort of like numbers with repeating decimals, right?
Mhm.
It's like the decimal goes off into infinity, but it never reaches a finite point. And so you may be right there. I mean, but here's the thing: we once understood how to look at substances, right? And then we learned how to look at we learned how to look at molecules, and then atoms, and then the subatomic level, and then the quantum level. So we're constantly growing technologically to the point where we're drilling in deeper. So I'm thinking that basically all matter is like a Mandelbrot sequence where you're constantly going to go deeper. You're going to find smaller components, and these smaller components are going to resemble their larger components, but ad infinitum.
Yeah. So let me come back and comment on like Smith Wigglesworth and Catherine Kuhlman. And I geeked out on that stuff, man, for years. I mean,
Me
I have
too.
full volumes of Mariah Woodworth Etter and Smith Wigglesworth and John G. Lake and going
Yep.
all the way back to John Alexander Dowie. I mean, I studied the healing movement from start to finish, its roots, its context, all of that stuff.
Yep.
But what's interesting to me is I think the argument could be made that we focused on those healers and supernatural signs and wonders people because they fit within the paradigm of Pentecostal Christianity. But interestingly enough, if you step outside of that, probably the most influential, famous, and effective spiritual healer in American history up till now was probably Edgar Cayce.
Yep. I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, probably Edgar Cayce. I mean, I think the New York Times did stories on Edgar Cayce. And the thing that's so interesting about Cayce, and this is what's so confusing about why, for me, some of these formulas, why the mystery is still there for me, some of these formulas break down. Because I understand the corporate aspect of it. I really do. I understand people coming together and expecting and agreeing and something happening. I totally get that there's agreement. We're touching on something higher consciousness. We're getting to that place where mind meets matter, where idealism meets realism, as you were talking about.
Yep.
But how do we replicate that? How do we reproduce that? Nobody knows. Nobody knows, or we'd be doing it, right? But Edgar Cayce is an interesting fellow to me because he was a Presbyterian, devoutly Presbyterian. He read the Bible through from start to finish every year. He taught Sunday school class. He was a very devout Christian. And he would give his readings and work his miracles and whatever else he was doing in a complete state of...
It's in a trance.
Yeah, but it was, I'm trying to think of the technical term. I can't believe I can't remember the technical term. Nobody would probably recognize it anyway, except maybe you. But in a deep enough trance that he had no conscious remembrance of what he said.
Right.
I can't believe I can't remember the term, but it doesn't matter. So if you think about somebody going into a deep state of hypnosis and then not remembering what they did under hypnosis, it would be akin to that.
Yeah.
Having a dream, not remembering the dream, it would be akin to that. So he would talk about things he did not believe, histories that were discovered after the fact that can be validated, at least to some extent. All kinds of stuff. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think he predicted World War II in one of those trance states that he was in. Yep. Now, he also predicted that Atlantis was going to rise in 1980 something or other from the ocean, and that certainly never happened.
Yeah.
So he wasn't 100%, right? But what's so fascinating to me is that he would lay out these profound metaphysical concepts, a lot of them that were at that time still mostly in the East, and the Western mind hadn't really come into contact with it yet. It wasn't like today, where, we've had the 60s and we've had Yogananda and we've had, the East meets West spiritual phenomenon like we've had in America. And yet he would talk about these profound concepts, these profound metaphysical concepts. People would get healed of all sorts of different things. And he really is the father in many ways of what is today the New Age movement, of what is today holistic medicine, because he would prescribe herbal remedies and things like that. So, all of the holistic medicine and stuff, nobody was doing that before Edgar Cayce. And all this channeling, which I think a lot of it is, well, I'll reserve. I'll restrain myself. But
I won't. I'll say sketchy.
Sketchy is a good word. Much nicer word than what I was going to say. So, yeah, that's interesting to me because on one level of consciousness, he has one person who fits the prevalent Christian belief system of the time, and yet there's this other person, this other consciousness that's coming out of him that is totally other than that and getting results, which
Yeah.
totally blows the idea of, well, if you believe it hard enough, it's going to happen. Because he didn't believe that stuff. It would happen to him when he's in these trance states.
Yeah.
So where did that come from? I mean, those are the kind of questions that I think about.
Well, no, I think that that's the convergence of consciousness, or the idealist and the realist. In other words, you're looking at something at a conscious layer, but you're actually manifesting it in a physical realm, right? And that's, if I could say this, that's the holy grail of all of this. And I think that if we were to look at, and this is the thing that really kind of, I guess, it kind of irritates me about both the scientific and the spiritualistic communities, is that both of them want to plant a flag
Yeah. Yeah, I
and
agree with
say,
you.
I got it.
I agree with
I
you.
got it. But I think that if you took the greatest minds in both areas and did a little bit of cross pollination and say, okay, let me expose this to you, and let me expose that to you. And then I think that then and only then can they begin to have intellectually honest discussions
Yeah.
about this. Because I really believe, and this was something that really, it kind of got me up the hill regarding spirituality, and eventually over the hill into atheism. It was that I began to see in quantum physics a lot of things that made spirituality make sense. Let me give you a case in point, right?
Hmm.
You may have preached this. I know I've preached it. And if you haven't preached it, you've heard it, that God operates at the speed of thought,
Okay.
right? In other words, we see from the physical science standpoint that the speed of light is a constant and it's inviolate. You can't, nothing can go faster than the speed of light. Because again, what you were saying is that anything that goes past the speed of light, that energy would begin to collapse upon itself,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So how is it then that God can, the concept God, that God can speak to people from wherever He is, like however distant a realm or a dimension or whatever. How is this possible? And this was the thing when I saw quantum entanglement. Quantum entanglement explains so much to me, because I remember when my grandmother died in 1971. I'll never forget it, because the day that she died, it was on a Friday, and we were out at one of my cousin's house. That they lived out in the suburbs, right? And so we spent the whole day. The adults were out there drinking and playing cards, and us kids were playing because they had a big backyard. And and so we came back home, and when we got home, one of my grandparents' friends pulled up, drove up, and he said, "Hey, why don't you guys come over and play some cards?" And so my grandfather looked at my grandmother, and they're like, "Oh, sure, why not?" Right?
Hmm.
And so my grandmother knelt down and she said, "Y'all come and give your grandma a hug." Now, why is this important? Because my grandmother never referred to herself as grandma to us. We called her Beetle. That was our nickname for her. We called her Beetle. And so she would say, "Hey," she would say, "Y'all come here and give Beetle some sugar," right? Something like that, right? She said, "Come and give your grandma a hug." So we went, me, my brother Brian, my sister Michelle, we all ran up to my grandmother and we hugged her.
Mhm.
I think that we became we were already quantum entangled, but we became more entangled at that point. I think that she was passing something on to us because she knew what was going to happen. She went over to these people's house. She was sitting up playing cards, and every now and then, my grandmother was not a drinker like my grandfather was, but she would have occasionally have a whiskey and coke. And it says she was sitting at the bar in these people's house drinking a whiskey and coke, and she fell off the bar stool and she died.
Wow.
That's how my grandmother died.
Wow.
Now, here's the thing that I remember we went over to the house and they had laid her in a bed, right? And she's dead. She looked like she was sleeping, but she was dead. And so we went home that night. And so my grandmother was a nurse, and normally she worked nights. But every other Saturday she was off. So this was going to be a Saturday that she was off. And when she was off, she got up and cooked a big breakfast, you know, eggs, bacon, pancakes, the whole shebang, right? And Aaron, I woke up that Saturday morning and I heard my grandmother call us by name. And she would call us by the oldest to the youngest: Derrick, Brian, Michelle, y'all come and eat. Now, and I'm preaching to the choir here because you had a similar experience
Yeah.
with your mom, right?
Mhm.
But I heard, and I smelled the bacon cooking. I smelled the coffee. I heard the pots and the pans, and also my grandmother was always she listened to gospel music pretty much all the time, and she had her Mahalia Jackson going. I heard everything was there, and so I got up out of the bed, ran to the kitchen because I knew that this is just a bad dream that I had. The kitchen was quiet. It was clean. Nothing was going on. And then it hit me. And my grandmother was really gone. What am I getting at? Is that for some reason, my grandmother, what was left of her presence here on earth, wanted to say something to me, you know? And so I got up to hear this. And, people would say, oh, well, that's just a hallucination. You're just having a dream. I think it's more than that. I think that her consciousness spoke to me that
Mhm.
morning. And I
Mhm.
think that her consciousness had something she wanted to do or something that she wanted to say. And so again, I'm going to say this and I'll shut up because I've talked a lot.
No, it's good, man.
That if we can get to the point where, okay, science can let its hair down and say, okay, guys, maybe there's something to understand in this metaphysical realm. And if the metaphysicians and the mystics can go to science and say, okay, you guys are onto some things here. Let's sit up and conscientiously, you know, so let's apply consciousness and let's apply logic to this, and let's try to unpack this together.
Mhm.
Because I think that if we can get to this, I think that we could do some things like we could start seeing healings. We could start seeing, untimely deaths reversed. I think that we can cure poverty, cure hunger. That I think that we can really get to the point where we have a literal human age of Aquarius, right?
Mhm.
But it's got to be where everybody lets down their
Yeah.
guard.
See, that's the problem. That's the problem. We can't sit down at the table, and some of it is because religion is so messy, right?
Yeah.
Because so much of what, if and this is what I've been able to do, um, for myself, is separate mystical, metaphysical phenomena and questions from religious dogma. But because, except in occult sciences, which I'll talk about in a minute, I hate even using that term because people hear it wrong.
No,
Um,
I love it, and I love the way you teach it. But keep going.
yeah, yeah, thanks. But I think that's part of the problem, right? I think the academic community that is so scientifically minded that they really are antagonistic. They're antagonistic towards parapsychology. They're antagonistic towards um, a lot of this stuff because, and I even hear it. I hear it from people on Facebook and stuff. It is so dismissive. Like you've just got to be an idiot if you don't believe. If you have something that's unexplainable, you must be an idiot if you try to build your life on that. I mean, that's kind of how it comes across. So condescending.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side of that, we can think on the mystical side of it, we can get lost in our mysticism. And that's what a lot of people are trying to do. That, this world means nothing. This life means nothing. This body means nothing. I mean, for thousands of years, mystics, and I'm talking about true mystics. I'm not talking about, BS stuff, but
Yeah.
it's like, we got to get out of here. This body is, I mean, Plato, the body is a tomb for the soul. And certainly in the East and all the East, and this is why I appreciate what's happening with East, West, but I really struggle with Western people importing Eastern ideas without understanding Eastern origins and context. I mean, some of the stuff about reincarnation was basically this life was hell. And think about it. Before the advances, thankfully, of modern science, that we can tip our cap to, where people are dying left and right. And, your circumstances are so bad, the thought of coming back again is horrific. And so all of this like transcendental meditation and all this stuff is rooted in a philosophy that says this place is hell and your karma is causing all this. And the goal is to completely escape it. Right. So on the one side, you've got a mystical bent that wants to reject physics and nature and humanity and the body and the earth and all of that. And then on the other side of it, you have those that are saying, no, this is if it doesn't fit this physical paradigm that we have, then it doesn't count. And we're antagonistic towards each other. But man, just imagine if we could, like you said, drop the defenses. Yep. And let the best minds, and I think that's critical, and I don't consider myself to be one of those best minds, but let the best
underestimate yourself.
Well, thank you. But I knew you were going to say that. But let the best minds. Derrick's always encouraging me. But let the best minds sit at the table and say, okay, can we figure this out? Can we figure out reality from a broader context without fighting with one another, without demeaning one another, and without thinking one approach or body of knowledge is superior to the other approach or the other body of knowledge, if that makes sense. I think that's the problem. It's just like politics. It's just like anything else where you can't sit down and let go of whatever it is that drives us as human beings.
Yep.
To other people and to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And mystics, you're the worst because you sit there and talk about oneness. We're one with everybody. We're one with all. What I do to you, I do to me. Well, then you shouldn't be othering people, but you're some of the worst others out there that I've met online. Absolutely 100% the truth. At times makes me ashamed to think of myself as a mystic. And so, there needs to be progression on both sides if we want to advance into those realms. And I do believe that there is the potential to advance into exactly what you're talking about, where we can reverse aging, where we can prevent deaths, where we can, use the best. It doesn't have to be either or. Like we can use the best of allopathic medicine, scientific medicine, Western medicine, whatever you want to call it. We can use the best of higher consciousness, and we can use the best of holistic approaches and bring it all together. Like whenever I work with somebody that's got an issue that, whether it's sickness, they've got cancer, or it's some form of mental illness that can be clinically diagnosed in the DSM-5. My thing is, let's throw the kitchen sink at this. Let's just throw everything we possibly can at this to try to fix this problem. And I wish that more people could take that approach. I think we'd see a lot more progress in every area and sphere of life. But at some point, we got to quit being so tribal, man.
And I was looking up something here. Richard Feynman, great physicist and everything, and it said that Feynman had this this philosophy or this take on philosophy. He called philosophy low-level baloney. And he said the philosophers are always on the outside making stupid remarks. Now, here's the thing. I think that there is a place for philosophy,
Mhm.
just like I think that there is a place for spirituality. I don't think that there's a place for religion. I think all religion is bullshit, but spirituality definitely. And but the thing is that if you are condescending toward a school of thought, you'll never I don't know, you'll never build those bridges. You'll never create the synergies that need to happen in order to see. Here's the thing. I think that we are humanity. We humanity are on the threshold of something extraordinary.
I do too.
I almost feel like, and I'm going to use a preaching term, birth pangs.
No, I agree. 100% agree. Um, Now, who made that statement?
Richard Feynman.
Who is he?
He was a quantum physicist, like from
Okay.
the late 50s, early 60s, or I think all the way up to like the late 60s is when he
Yeah.
died.
See, this is what bothers me about, and we talked about this not too long ago when we talked about the difference between, what was it, dialogue and discussion or whatever.
Yeah, dialogue and
Dialogue
discussion.
and debate, I think was, I like
Yeah,
that, framing it that way better. But there's no substance to that. All philosophy is baloney and you're just making stupid statements. I mean, that is baloney and a stupid statement in
it
and of it.
is. Yep.
And
And
I
I
guess,
have great respect for Feynman.
yeah, but that's it's that kind of dismissiveness that bothers me, right? It's that kind of, that's below a straw man argument in my view.
It is.
It's anyway. I'll let that go.
I mean, like, but that's the whole thing is that. So I go back and looked at Einstein,
Uh-huh.
and it's funny, like both Christians and Jews like to claim Einstein.
Sure. Yeah, of
They
course.
say, yeah, well, Einstein believed in God, and but if you go back and look at what he said that they asked, did he believe in God, and he said he believed in the God of Spinoza, and Spinoza was a philosopher, and basically. Spinoza believed in a God of light, a God of energy. It wasn't like God that we think of in the Bible or any religious construct, but that it was the source of all energy, the
Yeah.
source of the source of all matter. And so when Einstein said, "Yeah, I believe in God. I believe in the God of Spinoza," he was basically alluding to Spinoza's understanding of what the creative force would be. But I think that Einstein was giving a nod to something else. That there's something that drives this, that's something that pushes this, right? And this was part of the debates that he had with Niels Bohr back in the day, because Niels Bohr was not only a brilliant physicist, but he was also a very staunch atheist.
Hmm.
And I think that part of the reason why Einstein like quantum entanglement was Niels Bohr's biggest contribution to
Hmm.
the whole the realm of quantum science. And Einstein dismissed Bohr's theory. He called it spooky action at a distance.
Hmm.
He was like this in other words, Einstein was saying in a very polite and scientific way, this is bullshit,
Hmm.
right? But as it turns out, Bohr was right. But so was Einstein. And the thing is that when Einstein's theories on special relativity, they work at the macro level. Bohr's theories on quantum entanglement, quantum energy, they work at the micro level. And so part of the thing is, like, we've talked about this, the holy grail of science is to try to produce this unified field theory.
Right.
In other words, that harmonizes the macro science and the micro science, because the macro science, works on large bodies and it accommodates gravity. The quantum realm works on very tiny objects, but gravity doesn't factor in. It's like when you factor gravity into quantum physics, it breaks down, it collapses,
Mm.
right? So somewhere we know that gravity is a thing. We know that time and space are warped by large bodies creating gravitational fields, and we suspect that there is a particle that's not included in the standard model called a graviton that actually is the manifestation of gravity, right? But these things, these two disparate theories have yet to be harmonized into a single thing. And likewise, when we talk about the metaphysical and the mystical and the scientific and physical, this is where I think that the whole unified field theory, I think that the reason why it proves so elusive is that the unified field is going to have to accommodate what we call spirituality, what we call metaphysical or mystical. It's going to have to include that. And what I think is there's going to be something synergistic, serendipitous that basically harmonizes these two things. But as long as everybody's operating in silos, that's not going to come to pass.
Let me give you an example. So, and I'm not making well, maybe I am. I'll let you be the judge. But I heard a discussion recently that I listened to online where and it was two atheists using scientific materialism as their foundational model and talking about how you can't prove, like, why, how could anybody believe in God? How could anybody, have these conversions, because nobody's ever seen God? They're bringing it completely within the realm of not even quantum physics, almost Newtonian physics, and then
Yeah.
acting like that's just so stupid, right? And my thought was, after mingling with people of faith around the world for almost 30 years of my life, you how do I say this? Like, it's an apples and oranges comparison. It's such a straw man argument, because I never met a single person, not a single person, that said science and reason and logic brought me to faith.
Right. No.
But they could all point to events, phenomenon, changed life, something that gave them a reason to believe, right? Well, all of that stuff cannot be. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's false categories. They're two completely different categories. It's not even apples and oranges. It's more like apples and steak or something. You know what I mean? Because people, the reason that people believe, so to make an argument, to sit there for an hour and make an argument that because science can't prove God, therefore God doesn't exist,
Right.
the only people that are going to agree with that are people who've already made up their mind about atheism and scientific materialism. You're not touching anybody. Not that they're trying to convert people, but if you genuinely believe that the world would be better off without religion, then you might be motivated to create a persuasive argument.
Sure.
And I didn't find it a persuasive argument at all, but it kind of speaks to this whole issue, right? This whole issue of just misunderstanding each other, frankly.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that Einstein would say, I believe in the God of Spinoza. That means he was fluent in philosophy.
Yep. Exactly.
Right. And so there was more of a, I don't know, man. There was just, I think social media is to blame for a lot of it. I don't know. It's like,
No, I won't even say social. I think social media exacerbated the problem, but it's not the source. I think that these divisions existed beforehand. But if you want to make good use of social media, I think that social media it has proven to be a uniting force in a lot of areas. The
sure.
only problem is that it seems to unify idiots.
Well, I just, like, what's happened to that? That's what's frustrating to me. Like, I don't know, man. It's just, and the one of the things I really appreciate, I've grown tremendously from having discussions with you. I've grown tremendously, tremendously in every aspect, because I love when you present formidable ideas. I love when you present things that make me look at things from a different perspective, or consider something that I haven't considered before, or think about things in a different way.
Yep.
Like, I don't think growth is possible without that.
That's
I mean,
true.
I put out a post a while back, a month ago or something, and sometimes I'm just, it's automatic writing when I'm posting, just so people on Facebook know. I'm not putting a lot of deep thought into it. I'm just like,
Yeah.
and I put this post out about shit. I just forgot what I was going to say. I'm gonna blame that on COVID. I'm not going to blame that on old age. I'm gonna blame that on just having COVID. Everybody talks about COVID brain.
Yeah. Well, there you go, man.
It'll come back to me. Give me a minute. I don't even remember now. Oh well. It's
You know
just
what?
funny, but just in general, like I can make the point without remembering the specifics.
Yeah.
Like the pushback is like, I'll give you a different example, different one. I put out a joke that I saw, and I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm just saying this is the dynamics that we deal with. I put out a joke where there was a picture of a semi and it said, "Attention Walmart customers," something to the effect of, "Attention Walmart customers, you're now going to be responsible for unpacking the semi,
Unloading the truck. Yeah.
unloading the truck, in addition to self checkout." And this whole like thing started on the post about, I don't know why people complain about automatic checkout. And I'm like, "Jeez, can we just chill out?
Yeah. I
Can
saw
we
that.
just chillax?" And like, what happens to spontaneity in this culture
Yeah.
if you are forever remembered because it's a post wherever? And I'm not saying this about that, but this is a problem. Totally getting away from physics and metaphysics. But what happens to spontaneity when you have to think about how somebody might misunderstand you on social media or in a conversation and then pigeonhole you to that one moment in time
Yep.
when you said or thought something? Like, this is who you're. I mean, it's just crazy. But
Yeah.
anyway, sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
No, you know, here's the thing is that I've learned this that people who dedicate themselves to misunderstanding you, that
True.
they're going to misunderstand you no matter what.
Oh, that's true.
It's just a matter of time.
True.
Again, using my metaphor, given a sufficiently long timeline, you know, you given a sufficiently long timeline, you'll step on everyone's toes,
Yeah.
right? So it's just a matter of time. I have posted something about Israel and Palestine on Instagram, and my Instagram has like been on fire, man. But I think I lost like maybe about 5,000 people like in a span of an hour because what I said about this. Because here's the thing, I just to put this out there, I am totally in favor of the coexistence of Israel and Palestine.
Yeah.
I'm on the record as saying that. I don't think that either side should be able to impress their will on the other. I believe that somehow they have to both acknowledge the right of the other to exist.
Right.
Now, what does this tie in? What we're saying is that science does not give spirituality the right to exist, and spirituality doesn't give science the right to exist.
Yeah.
It's the same argument, just in a broader context. And in order to have progress, just like how you said some very glowing things about me and things that I say that help you grow. And I say the same thing about you all the time because I almost became a materialistic humanist.
Hmm.
I came very close to landing there until I listened to some things that you said. And I said, okay, if I'm going to be intellectually honest, I have to give a birth to these mystical, metaphysical things, that I have to consider the spiritual aspect of things. If I'm not doing that, then I'm becoming dogmatic and I sacrifice my intellectual honesty. And
Hmm.
I'm not prepared to do that. It's like my my intellectual honesty and my ability to entertain multiple thoughts is far more important to me than being right.
Right.
So that was that was the thing about that. But again, I think that
Well, let me just interject there, Derek,
go
because
ahead.
one of the things you brought up about religion is religion is case closed, whereas science is not. But the scientific materialist or scientific humanist can become case closed.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly right. And the thing is, when you become dogmatic, it doesn't matter which
Right.
side you're on. You've galvanized your position, and you say I'm right and everyone else is wrong, and
Right.
that's not a tenable uh, intellectual position.
Right. Well, it doesn't move the needle for
Right.
sure. In any way, in
Yeah.
society, in relationships, in progress. I think there's a reason none of us are omniscient, but maybe if we all got together and dropped our defenses, we might be.
Hey, or maybe not even omniscient, but
I mean, I'm
maybe
using hyperbole, but
no. I mean, but that's a hyperbole that works for me because maybe it's not omniscience, but let's say that our prescience, that it increases. It may not graduate to omniscience, but better prescience is still a good thing, right?
yeah, well, it encourages growth. It encourages expansion. I mean, just like I was saying from our conversations and stuff, I've grown tremendously because I've had to wrestle with things. I've had to rethink things. I've had to consider new information. I've had to um, nuance my arguments.
Yeah,
I think somebody posted, I was just kind of glancing the comments, but yeah, Daryl Carlson here, he says a big part of it seems to be when we humans let our brains' need for stability and certainty leak into our sense of self. My self-value is bigger than my need to be right or certain, and I think that's the issue. It's
yeah,
just it's very easy to live life with certainty, but it's not very fun, and it's not very interesting, and it's not very expansive, and it's not very conducive to growth. But I think it's just easier, but I think it keeps us infantile in some ways.
it does. And that's a good word, infantile, because I think that if there is a goal for humanity, it would be to learn and grow and to improve the condition of life for each successive generation.
Yeah,
You know, it's not to get to heaven. It's not even to something so altruistic as like world peace. It's just how do we get together and produce a life that produces the least amount of suffering.
yeah,
But I think that if we learn to and it's so funny, like people get all caught up in the left brain, right brain,
yeah, and they don't understand it at all.
they don't. But the thing about it is that both sides of the brain are necessary, and and this is the funny thing, that both sides of the brain are somewhat redundant, because there have been people that have had full hemispherical
Yeah, the
removals.
corpus callosum either isn't there when they're born, or it has to be cut to heal a
Yeah.
certain type of epilepsy.
And so these people, they go on and not only like right brain people or people that have the right hemisphere remaining, they continue to produce a high left brain function, and people that lose the left brain are still in the creative mode that the right brain produces. So I think that our physical body that there are things that are necessary, but I also believe that there's a certain amount of redundancy built into the human machine. But I think that also applies in thought,
Mhm.
right? Because some people will say, and I've been guilty of this, that if we just all think logically and reasonably, that humanity would be better. But I see where emotion and spiritual things help to move the needle. I see that. And so I've learned not to just dismiss those things. Now, the only thing that I do dismiss out of hand is religion. I'm on the record of saying this for everybody that's listening: fuck religion with a glass studded dildo. But anyway, sorry. But the point that I'm getting at is So spirituality, I think, is different. It's different because we are all spirit beings. That we all possess a spirit, and the proof of that is that when we die, something leaves us.
Mhm.
Something leaves us. So what is that thing? That's spirit. Okay. So I think that in order to really move the needle for humanity, to get I mean, and right now, like I said, we're in the precipice. And here's the funny thing about being on the precipice of something is that from when you're in it, when you're in the midst of it, it may seem like a rut. But if you look outside, if you're able to expand your consciousness to see it from the outside, you'll see that you're not on in a rut at all. You're on the ledge of something extraordinary.
Mhm.
And that's what I think we need to do. We need in order for us to see that, we've got to get out of our we got to get out of our own heads and get out of our own mental rut and see this from a higher plane, from a higher perspective. And once we do that, I think that when we're able to dovetail quantum physics and spirituality, metaphysics, mysticism, I think that we're going to see humanity experience a transformation like it's never had in the history of humanity.
Yeah. So I hesitate to say this because, but hey, I like to say provocative things to shock people. But I do believe there is a science to astrology, real astrology. And I don't think that the average American has the first clue, not the first clue, not even, they don't even know they don't even know the ABC of the entire alphabet.
Hmm.
And they try to judge astrology when they don't even know ABC yet, much less A to Z.
Yeah.
But according to astrology, we are in the shifting of an age from regarding a thing called the precession of the equinox from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius. And I do think um, that we are being forced, if you will, or pushed or influenced into an entirely different expression of being as the human race. And I think that's part, and I think the energy of that and the impact of that is part of the reason we're seeing so much polarization right now. And part of the reason that we're seeing people kind of lose their minds and fight so much because it's happening to us, whether we want it to happen to us or not. And just like a cataclysmic event on a physical level may cause us to not know how to respond, I think we're experiencing a cataclysmic event in a shift of consciousness. And I think most people don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say. And with that, I'm done, man.
That's a good place to stop, man. This has been a good discussion, and I hope that everybody is listening, that they got something that, remember this. If I can leave a parting shot, just, lay down your own prejudices and be open minded and accept that you don't know it all. Listen. I'm going to tell you something. I know that I know that I know I'm a smart guy, but I know that I know that I know that I don't know it all. So I'm constantly learning, and the thing I love about our conversations, Aaron, is that we grow in real time, man.
Absolutely. All right, man. Love you. Have a great weekend. Thanks everybody for watching. And we'll be back with you next week.
All right, love y'all.
Peace. We're out.
Peace.